Welcome to Reading Through the Bible with Foluke. I'm so glad you're here. Today, we are going to talk through, unpack chapter 5 of the book of Genesis. So, I hope you have your drink of choice with you. I have a lot of mugs, but this one says, "Morning Beautiful." That's me. All right, so grab your drink, take a sip. I didn't take a sip. Take a sip. Very good. And let's read through the Bible together. So last time we left off in the book of Genesis. We've been reading through the book of Genesis, but we were reading through chapter 5. And in chapter 5, it talked through the descendants of Adam. And this is where we learned about Seth and his family and the various lines of the 7 generations, right? So there's just a couple things that I want to unpack as we go through this. We talked a little bit about the ages, right? Why is it that people were living for so long? And a lot of that had to do with their genes being so fresh. I mean, like, seriously, God had just created them. They had the best genetics ever. And then there was one individual by the name of Enoch. And I want to talk a little bit more about Enoch today. When we get to the part of Enoch, Enoch is 7 generations from Adam. Okay, there was Adam, Seth, Enosh. Then there was Kenan, Mahalalel. Then there was Jared. And then there was Enoch. And the significance of Enoch, there's actually a lot of significances. We'll try to unpack some. Enoch lived to be 365 years old. That's a year for every day of the year. Okay, so that was very interesting. Why 365? I don't know. Maybe God wanted to emphasize something, that was enough. He lived a day for every year, a year for every day. It's time for you to go. Another thing is that Enoch is the first of 3 people who did not die. Okay, so we hear of Enoch walking with God, and we'll talk a little bit about that. What does that actually mean? And then later on in the Old Testament, we hear of a prophet, Elijah, who was taken up. And he did not die. And the third one, I'm sure you've heard of him, was Jesus. He died but was resurrected, right? So he officially did not die, right? There's no body buried in the ground that you can find and excavate. There are people who, because God feared they might be idolized, we know that they actually died. Like, for instance, Moses. Moses is not one of the 3 who did not die. He died, and God says that he died, but God also says God buried him himself. And God buried Moses because he did not want the Israelites turning his body into an idol. We talked a little bit about idol worship when we followed Cain's line, and the reason why, very likely, why God mentioned the different things that came forth from Cain's line is because those are the things that are used for idol worship. And God hates idol worship. God does not like anyone's image being put up, elevated, whether it's to resemble him, to speak for him, to signify him, or even to signify a lesser God. He just hates it very much. So Moses died and Moses was buried, but no one knew where Moses was buried. How God did it, we don't know. There's a lot of things in the Bible that we just don't know. But I was thinking too, I like to think a lot about the Bible, as you can tell. I was thinking not just about the 3 people who did not die and were not buried, but then I recall, and I'm going to fact check myself and I'll post it later if I'm wrong, but I recall that when Jesus walked the earth, there were 3 people that he raised from the dead. Okay. I am recalling there was a widow and her son. And that always touches my heart because he was her only son. And I have an only son, right? An only child. And he was being buried. Like the funeral taking place, they were walking him out of one of the gates of Jerusalem, I believe. And Jesus saw this parade. He wasn't invited to the funeral. He didn't know the people. But as he was walking into the gate, Jesus saw this procession coming out of the gate, and realizing that this was a widow a woman who was burying her only son, and the significance of that at that time, Jesus touches the body, and he tells the young man to get up. And he got up. Then there was another one, and I love how the Bible emphasizes over and over and over again that God is not a respecter of persons, male or female. God is just amazing. You have to read the Bible so wrong to think that God had some kind of a gender, I don't know, preference or something. God loves both his sons and his daughters. But there was a young girl, I believe she was 12 years old, and she passed away. And her father went to get Jesus, and Jesus had, I believe it was Peter and maybe 2 other disciples, likely James and John, but I could be wrong, who they went into that room with the girl, and he was able to bring her back to life. So that was 2. And then the third, you probably heard of this one, and that was Lazarus. The thing about those 3, sometimes I have troubles with my fingers. The thing about those 3 that Jesus raised from the dead is that each one of those individuals ultimately died again, right? It wasn't like they were raised from the dead and they lived forever. No, but Enoch didn't get raised from the dead and die again. He simply was taken. God took him. That is such an honor. Like, what? So I want to read again what actually happened. Enoch lived 365 years walking in close fellowship with God. Then one day he disappeared because God took him. Imagine imagine that you walk so closely with God that God took you. Now that reference to walking close with God. When Adam and Eve sinned, what was God doing? God was walking in the cool of the day, because that was like a routine for him to walk with Adam, to converse so closely with Adam. Imagine he was just in relationship with Adam. That is what God enjoyed and wanted, and did not want any interference from just walking with us, being in relationship with us. And Enoch enjoyed that intimacy with God. And God obviously enjoyed that intimacy with Enoch. And he's like, look, dude, you are not going the way of all these other people. No way. You're coming with me. So awesome. All right. Check out all that other stuff as well. And then Methuselah, and his name meaning he will die when it comes. Right? I wonder what you think about that. What do you think about having a name like that? Sometimes we take names for granted, and it's just, Bob, Billy, Tom, right? That we don't put much weight into what a name means. But in the Bible, the names of people and the meaning of those names is really significant, because they very often live up to their names, or their names is prophesying something significant that will happen to them. So I think it's important that we pay attention to the names and the meanings of names. And I won't get to unpack every single one as we go through the Bible readings, but I definitely encourage you to do a little research on it. And if you haven't already, research your own name. What does it mean? Now, it doesn't mean that you have to live up to that name. If you find out that your name means something like, I forget his name, but I remember her name. Abigail in the Bible, she ended up being the wife to King David. And she was married to a man whose name literally meant fool. He's a fool. If you find out that that's what your name means, I don't know what to tell you, but I know that God is really good at changing people's identities. So I will let the Holy Spirit unpack that one with you. Okay, let's see. What else can we touch on in chapter 5? Oh yeah, we talked a little bit about the sons of God. That's the first reference to that, not the sons of man, right? We've been talking about the wickedness of men and how they just kept getting worse and worse. And we're just talking, I believe, to Noah was 10 generations, right? Enoch was 7. And then there was Lamech, Methuselah. Enoch was 7, Methuselah was 8, and then Lamech was 9, and Noah was 10. 10 generations from Adam. And 10 is another very significant number in the Bible that God uses as like maturity, right? We'll unpack that a little bit. But it talks about the sons of God. And what was it about the sons of God being with human women that God did not like so much? It grieved his spirit so much that God was like, oh no, no. My spirit will not put up with humans for such a long time, right? And in the future, their normal lifespan will be no more than 120 years. Okay, I've heard quite a few preachers, maybe I shouldn't say quite a few, I've heard a handful of preachers talk a lot about giants and different spiritual beings. And that's something that I would leave for you to unpack on your own. I'm not knowledgeable about that, and I feel that study may take us a bit off track from what it is that God is unpacking in regards to this. But there were angelic beings, there were sons of God that were misbehaving. So what does that say, right? If Lucifer, Satan, who was this beautiful being, you'll hear more about him as you read through the rest of the Bible. If he could fall, if he could think himself so high and mighty above God, right, that he forgot that God created him for a purpose. Who are all these other beings that somehow decided that they would, take to themselves human women? Well, God didn't like that very much. And what does it mean that the children became the heroes and famous warriors of ancient times? Does that mean that the sons of God created Superman or Superman-like beings? I don't know. That they're, so heroic. When we think of heroes, we think of being able to withstand bullets, right? Walk through fire kind of thing. I'm not quite sure what the Bible means by they became the heroes and famous warriors of ancient times, but seems like they had extra power than mere humans did because of the relationship between the sons of God and human women. It birthed something that God did not necessarily want on this earth. And later on, we find out that all of that was eradicated. And it may have been actually the reason why it's put into this story right here is because that may have been the cherry on top of the frosting on top of the cake that God is like, oh no, I need to wipe all of them out. I need to get rid of them. And if that is the case, then that means after the flood, those Nephilites, those giants, did not exist anymore. Okay, but we will find out if that is the case as we continue to read. The Lord observed the extent of human wickedness on the earth, and he saw that everything they thought or imagined was consistently and totally evil. So the Lord was sorry he had ever made them and put them on the earth. It broke his heart. Now, I want to stop there because As I mentioned earlier, God is not a respecter of persons. And sometimes people try to picture God as, yes, masculine. He goes by he. God is very clear. He is a he, right? But sometimes people attach emotions and even characteristics. They attach a gender to it, right? As if having a feeling, having feelings is a very feminine thing. But you will find all throughout the Bible that God has feelings. God has a lot of feelings. And his feelings get hurt. We get our feelings, our emotions. Imagine all the emotions that you experience throughout a day: joy, fear, anxiety, right? Anger. God has all of those feelings. We actually get our feelings from him. And he probably has 1,000 more feelings we've never even expressed, even touched or named, right? Psychologists can't name them, just like they can't possibly, not psychologists, but people who name colors. They can't possibly name every single color, right? They sure do try, the color palette and all of that, but God can name every single color, and it's probably tens of thousands more than we can imagine. But he also can name all the feelings, and he has a lot of them. And I would be careful to imagine God as this emotionless, masculine block. That's not the God we serve. The God we serve gets his feelings hurt. He, like anyone in a relationship, right? He has expectations of those he's in a relationship with. He wants it to be reciprocated love. He pours out and he pours out and he pours out. And when it's not reciprocated, God gets his feelings hurt. The thing about God, though, unlike us human beings, is when our feelings get hurt, the way we respond is not always just. Sometimes it's selfish. But God's anger is a righteous anger. It's an anger that sees beyond today, beyond next year, and sees to all time to correct wrongs, right? So when he responds in anger, it's because it's a justified anger. It's a righteous anger. And his response is going to be a just response to make things right. Even if it doesn't appear to be right today or tomorrow and it doesn't feel comfortable, you have to rest assured that God is just and his actions are righteous. So God got his feelings hurt. But as you can see, all the years that we're passing, 900 years, it's not as if God overreacted with human beings. I hope you can agree with me. God's anger was not like, oh, you pissed me off, I punch you in the face, there you go. No, God gave them chance after chance, year after year, generation after generation. And by generation 10, God was done. So the Lord said, I will wipe this human race I have created from the face of the earth. Yes, and I will destroy every living thing. All the people, the large animals, the small animals that scurry along the ground, and even the birds of the sky. I am sorry I ever made them. But Noah found favor with God. And that reveals the other characteristic of God: grace. God overwhelms us with grace. We did not deserve a second, a third, a 4,000th chance. But if there is one righteous, even for that one, God will spare us. God consistently holds what's called a remnant. That's a handful, like just a small group of people. And in Noah's case, it was just Noah plus 7. That's an interesting number, right? 1 plus 7 equals 8. Noah plus 7. That was it. And in the future, you'll find other situations where it's just a handful. God wipes out everyone, but for the one, whether it's Lot and his family, but whenever there is a righteous, God holds back full, complete judgment because he is a gracious God, full of grace, full of mercy, abounding in love. That is the God we serve. Thank you for joining me as we unpacked Genesis 5. Oh, reading this Bible is just so fun. I hope you're enjoying it. Take a sip of your drink. Yes. Always stay hydrated. Until next time, read through the Bible with Foluke.